So, for part two of my ambient music pads and ambiences series thingy or whatever you want to call it, I'm gonna break down an old track of an unreleased track of mine. Sorry, I finished this one 2 days ago, and I thought this would serve as a great example on how finished tracks of mine occur, and the layers that go into it. And I could this could serve as a great example of me just breaking down every single layer and tackling what I did to make it sound like that. So yeah, I'm gonna play like a 2 minute clip of the track, just for you guys to get like a vibe of the track, and just for you guys to hear it. And after that, we're gonna get in straight into breaking down this track. So yeah. Getting into this, the first layer that I started with was this SM Granita thing. This is a free granulator that I found in Max for Life, this website. It's great, it's simple, does the job. What I fed into it was this thing. It's a Chinese instrument that sounds like that. And I took a very small section of it and I put it in the granulizer and isolated this little section, put reverb on it, and without all of this nonsense that's going on, this is what that sounded like. And I wanted to filter this out because there's too much going on. So then I put an auto filter and I filtered it around like 220 hertz ish. And what I did was I put an LFO, mapped it to the frequency, and the LFO is set on random. So every so often it's gonna it's just gonna randomly bounce back and forth between the upper range and the lower range that I've set for the frequency. So that's around like 250 hertz ish to all the way down to like I think 170 or something, and that just adds like a nice little bit of modulation to the layer instead of it just being stagnant. And that's just a tuner after that for me to keep track of what key I'm in, an EQ just to filter out some frequencies a bit. Sorry, cut out some frequencies a bit. The cyclic panel is just adding some stereo width. That's all it's doing. You can do that in basically, you can do that in a lot of ways. And this grain cooler thingy we'll get to way later on, because this is how I made sounds deteriorate towards the end of the track. So we're gonna get into that later once I've covered basic raw core elements. Now, the layer below that, this one, is just the same thing as the one up top, but it's pitched up 12 semitones and it's filtered at 340 hertz instead of 220, like the previous one. That's all that's different about it. And then there's an auto filter that's at 540 hertz, and apart from that, that's the same stereo with grain cooler, and yeah. So that one sounds like this as opposed to the previous one. It just adds some nice upper harmonic textures to the sound. So yeah, third layer that we're going to be tackling is this contact layer. Now, this started off as being just a simple two-note ARP. That's all I wanted to do in the beginning. I just took Noir from Contact and I just played this little two-note ARP thingy that sounded like this. Hold on, let me just boost up the volume a bit. And I felt that's dumb as hell, so I put a bunch of reverb on it and I converted it into a drone. I filtered the high frequencies and then I put a utility and I mapped an LFO to the utility in the same way that I mapped an LFO to the frequency in the previous layer. And this is doing the exact same thing. It's just jittering the gain parameter a bit and it's making it go up and down according to this range that I've set. So that's like, I think 10 decibels to -2 or -3 if I'm right. And that's doing a couple of things. One, it's making the layer sound like that. And two, it's constantly bringing the layer back in prominence and it's getting the layer out of prominence. And it's doing that at random. I have no control over it. So that adds some nice little, it adds some nice little movement over time in the track, which I really like. After that, there's Freak by Native Instruments. That is how I did the whole disintegration thing towards the end for this layer, which again I'm going to get to when I get to the grain coolers. And that's about it for how this layer came about. After that, these two are really simple. This is just free shit from labs. This is just London Atmos Night Tube without the filtering and reverb and everything. This is what it sounds like. And then there's just reverb and a filter. And again, just a layer on top of what is already going on. And to add some low frequencies to all of this, there is this patch that I made long back on Wavetable. And it's nothing except just a pad on the lower octaves with a bit of EQing, reverb, and filtering. That's literally all it is. And this is what it sounds like. It's just adding a nice little low, warm layer under all of what is happening up top. And all of that together is just the raw core elements of the track. That's everything without the texturing. Again, the texturing plays a very important role in this track as it plays with a lot of my ambient tracks. So I'm going to get into breaking down the textures now, which starts off really simply by just some street ambience. This is all it is. Just a bit of EQing and drop down really low. So it just sits in the background. It just sits way down there. On top of which there is this foley layer, which sounds like this without all the processing. This is stretched a bit from the original sample, so I think the original one probably sounded like that or something like that. I think this is, yeah, stretched a lot, if I remember correctly. And I put some reverb on it, filtered frequencies with an EQ. And again, the whole disintegration element comes from the grain cooler that I'm going to get to later. So after that, to add some more texture to the song, I used these little Foley hits that sound like that. And those are just literally just spaced rhythmically throughout the track like that, with some EQ and some ping pong delay. And the delay is automated, so it kicks in only on the second hit. The first hit is not delayed. I just thought it wasn't necessary. I felt it was. I felt it. The first hit was better without the delay. Over all of that texture is this little contact instrument called kinetic metal. Great little tool. It's comprised of two little aspects. It's metal and waves. Waves are more rhythmical, melodic, harmonic textures, and metals are more Foley. So in this case, I've only used the metals. I've only used the Foley. And I took all four of the metallic textures and I automated them over time, just randomly. I'm gonna boost up the volume a bit so you guys can hear. So all of these individual layers they add over time, get automated, and they add some great texture to the song. Just sit very nicely on top of everything that's going on. And that's essentially the track. It's very minimalistic, very simple. It's just four layers of texture with 5 layers of pads, and yeah, that's about it. Now, getting into the whole disintegration as deterioration aspect, how I did that was through this plugin called Grain Cooler that I got from Max for Live from Isotonic Studios. I'm going to link that down in the description. And through Freak by Native Instruments. Now I'm gonna tackle Grain Cooler first because I've used this more than Freak in this track. Freak I've just used once for this layer. So now what Grain Cooler does is it takes the input that you give it and it plays back little tiny grains based on densities and probabilities and durations that you set in this little section here. And you can process it and filter it in different ways, and you can end up with and you can end up making a sound go from sounding like that to this. You can hear the little grains in the background. That's what it's doing to the track over time, and that just adds some great bit of texture to the track over time. So I've automated the driver to go from 0 to 100 towards the end of the track. So it constantly keeps, it sounds like it's deteriorating over time and becoming this textury, grainy mess as opposed to the full blown pad that it was in the beginning. And this I've done for a lot of layers, which is this one, and this Foley layer. I really love how it makes the Foley layer sound towards the end. And that's about that's about it really. It's just that simple. It's just a whole bunch of granular nonsense. This layer just stays intact, I think, throughout the track because it's not too prominent, and I felt like I could just leave it there. The pads, the way it's like the low end, the way that I've taken out the low end is just through some high pass filtering. It's just automated towards the end of the track like this, just up until 475 hertz. That gets rid of the low frequencies enough towards the end of the track. And lastly, there is Freak on this channel. And that does the same thing that the grain cooler is doing, but using frequency, ring, and radio modulation. And that makes the layer sound like that from this. So it adds to the jitter that's happening with the LFO, and it adds a nice little static crackle thingy on top of it and messes up the sound a little bit. Makes it sound a bit more glitchy. And again, the mix just builds up over time. It's just getting automated towards the end of the track. And that's essentially the track in a nutshell. It's just some minimalistic layers with a whole bunch of automation. And yeah, that's about it. That's about it for this track. That's how I came up with this. I hope my explanation was sufficient. I hope you guys learned something, took something out of this. I'm still getting used to making YouTube videos and being comfortable in front of a mic and comfortable making videos and talking, because I still get nervous when I make these, and I cannot. I feel like I cannot explain things as well as I would normally do. So that's just something that's gonna keep improving over time, I guess. And I'm gonna see you next week in part 3, where we're gonna tackle another aspect of creating pads, ambiences, and ambient music. So yeah, take care.